Let's look at an application with operations on functions. And we are specifically looking today at profit functions. Now, you need a little background here about profit, especially if you've not taken any business classes. That's okay. Let's give you a little background. So, the revenue is the amount a company charges for an item multiplied by the number of items sold. So, let's say you go and buy a pack of gum and the pack is $3 and they sell 10 packs. That's $30. You took the price and you multiplied it by the number of items sold. That's generating the revenue. What that revenue doesn't tell you, though, is how much it costs for them to actually create that pack of gum and produce that pack of gum. It didn't account for the labor or anything. So that $30 is not the final amount that person or that company is making. It is the amount that they just get from selling the item. Then you have costs. Costs can come in a couple different forms, especially in this problem. Now, it obviously can be far more complicated in a real business. But we have fixed cost. Fixed costs are going to be costs that are the same basically every month, no matter how many items are produced. That might be like, for example, the rent or lease on a building. You got to pay that no matter how much you sell. But then you have variable costs. That's going to be like the labor, how much you're paying for the people to do it and make those materials and make those products. And then the materials, how much does it actually cost to buy the raw materials to make the product, okay? And so total cost is C of X, which is our variable cost times the variable X plus the fixed cost. Let's go back. Our revenue is R of X, which is the selling price times the number of items, okay? And then we have the profit. I'll come back to this break-even point. The profit is P of X, and it is how much they sold it for times how many they sold, so revenue minus the cost. So how much they bring in minus how much it cost them to make it. That's going to be your profit, okay? So a lot of times people think that just the $30 that I was mentioning a minute ago is their profit. That's not true. You've got to subtract off your costs. So revenue minus cost. P of X equals R of X minus C of X. And a lot of times, because we previously looked at subtracting two functions, remember that we want to put parentheses around that second function. So let's look at our specific example now. We have Cookie Dough Inc., and they sell containers of cookie dough. The fixed cost to maintain their business is $1,200 per month. The labor and materials for each container is $225. The company sells a container for $535 each. So looking at A, write a function for the monthly total cost. Cost is the key word here, and we need to figure out cost. So cost is variable cost. Variable is your labor and materials. So that's $225. And again, this is for each. So that means that $225 is $225 per container. Plus your fixed cost. Your fixed cost is how much they're paying standard per month. Well, it says that our fixed cost to maintain is $1,200 per month. So this is $1,200. That's going to be our cost function, 225x plus 1,200. Part B, write a function for the monthly total revenue. Revenue is how much they're charging per item times the number of items. So the company sells a container of cookie dough for $535 each. This is going to be $535 times the number of items, which we don't know. That's going to be our X. Okay, so now that we've got revenue and cost, our monthly profit, our total profit here, will be, again, P of X equals revenue, R of X, minus parentheses, C of X. And now we're going to plug. This is going to be revenue, which is 535x, minus the cost, which is 225x, plus 1,200. Okay, so now we're going to distribute the negative. So 535x minus 225x minus 1,200. And then we have 535x minus 225x is 3.1x minus 1,200. Okay, if you did this correctly, then this has to be negative because, again, your profit has to be subtracting off those fixed costs. So remember that, because if you work this and that ends up being positive, then that's not correct. Okay. All right, let's look at D. Find the cost when 600 containers are sold. We have a cost function. This is basically saying plug in 600. So we are plugging 600 into the 225x plus 1200. So 225, let's try that again. 225 times 600 plus 1200. Well, let's see what that ends up being in our calculator. So 225 times 600 plus 1200 is 2550. Okay, so that means that our cost is $2,550. Revenue here is going to be using revenue function. So 535 times 600. 535 times 600 ends up being 3210. And then our profit is going to be using this. So this would be 3.1 times 600 minus 1200. 3.1 times 600 minus 1200 is 660. So we would make $660 by selling the max number, by selling 600, by selling 600 containers of cookie dough. Now, quick note on this. You might be able to notice this, especially if you understand that the profit is revenue minus cost. If you find the revenue here of 600 and the cost of 600, you can find the profit of 600 by just subtracting the two. 3210 minus 2550 gives us that 660. However, I would only use that as a check, okay? Because what you really want to make sure is that when you check that and you get 660, that actually still equals what you got when you plug 600 in to the profit function over here. If you did the wrong sign here, then these are not going to be the same when you plug it in, and then that's your cue that you need to go back and reevaluate your profit function. Okay, so that's kind of a little way you can check to make sure you're on the right track. Okay, and you can do that with you can pick any value for, this is really picking values for X here. So you can pick any value for X, plug it in, and make sure when you do that subtraction that you end up with the same thing as if you just plugged it into the profit function. Hope that makes sense. One part I want to talk real quick about, which does not ask it in this problem, but I just want to briefly mention the break-even point. So the break-even point is where your basically cost and revenue are the same. So the money you're bringing in is enough to cover all of your cost, but you really don't make any more than that. You're just breaking even. So you can think of this as two different ways. You can think about it as your revenue and cost being equal, or you can think about it as your profit being zero. Okay, so if you see that, basically set your cost and revenue equal to each other and solve, or you can set your profit function equal to zero and solve. So you've got a couple ways there to do it, but basically they're asking is, and this is really key for any business, how much do I need to sell to at least cover my costs so I'm not in the hole? That's break-even point. Okay.